Hello everyone, this is the Historical Gamer. Thanks for joining me here today. Today I'm going to be playing To End All Wars, a new a new turn-based strategy game by Ageod. And its focus, as you might guess by the title, is World War I. So the game comes with 4 scenarios here. You've got a Great War scenario, which is really just the historical war plans in which you play the game through from the very start of the war to the end. You've got a tutorial which looks at the Battle of Tannenberg. It's only about a 7-turn scenario where you play as the Germans. You've got that same tutorial scenario where you play as the Germans or the Russians. And you've got a Great War full campaign which adds 1 turn onto the historical campaign and allows you to choose your war plan. That 1 turn is a lot like World War I Gold, if you're familiar with it. The war plan options are all basically the exact same as World War I Gold, and I already did that in a short little YouTube video I made over on my YouTube channel here and posted earlier today. I am doing the full campaign, but I've already played the first turn, so I'm just going to jump in here to resuming the game that I've already started here. So I'm just going to wait for that to load for a second here. Okay. So sometimes the game, I will say, when you first get into it, at least on my computer anyway, is a little bit laggy until you've kind of scrolled around the map. We are in early August. It's the first turn here, essentially, after the picking of your campaigns here. So I apologize here. I probably should have done this before I started, but I'm just going to kind of jump around the map here. So it'll scroll more quickly once I get going, essentially. So as you can see here, it's a pretty good size map, quite a few different regions, extending all the way from France to kind of the borders of the Ural Mountains in Russia. You've got some diplomacy boxes up here which are going to be relevant in just a very little bit, actually. And then you've also got some off-map boxes, which, if we zoom in here, allows you to include areas outside of the main fronts. That's going to be much more important when you're looking at some of the colonial fighting taking place. So you can see here, if we look at the Pacific, we've got the Asia division under Maximilian von Spee for the Germans is already out at sea. We've got a French cruiser, it looks like, just probably an individual cruiser here. If we click on this, we can see it's a scouting ship, and it looks like it's only maybe 1 ship, the light cruiser, Zillet. So probably wouldn't stand much of a chance against von Spee's squadron. You can really easily tell the strength of a unit by the kind of number there at the bottom is the firepower of that unit. So von Spee has 344. This cruiser with transports only has 39. So maybe they're bringing in colonial infantry. Let's see here. So there's the Pacific. You've got a similar box like that if we go down here for the Atlantic and all the colonies over there. But before we kind of jump into all that, let's take a look at the Western Front. Now, I chose the historical war plan. I'm playing as the French. I've never really played as the French in a World War I game before, but I figured it would be a nice change of pace. Plus, I'm pretty new to Ageod games, so this is a game that has a lot to it from my initial impression. And playing as the French with a limited front, I think, is going to be easier to start out than playing the Germans, where you have to play both the East and the West front. The Allies are broken into both the Western Entente. Someone told me on my YouTube channel how to pronounce it, but I can't remember anymore. I know it's not entity, but it's like Untitled or something like that. And it breaks the Allies essentially into 2 camps. You've got the Eastern Allies, who are the Russians and the Serbians to start, and then they add the Romanians, assuming they join the war, and anyone else who joins the war on the Eastern side, so maybe like Greece. And then you've got the Western Allies, who are, France and Britain at the start, America later on, and whatnot. So we're going to be following the historical war plan here, which, as the French, involves a thrust in toward Mulhausen and Colmar, and also a thrust into Metz and Morgenau, which was represented by the Battle of the Frontiers in the early days of World War I. Now, the Germans' main objective is going to be to sweep through Belgium here in a flanking maneuver to try and get around our armies and also drive on Paris. The French actually were well aware of this German strategy. Their thought was that if they could drive into the center of Germany quick enough, they could cut the Germans off from their line of supply and basically make those armies useless in France, as they'd be cut off from their base of supply and communications. So we're here on the first turn. We've got some options up here. We can enter military recruitment right away. We also have got the ability to make some decisions here. So I think one of the first things we're going to need to do is some diplomacy. We want to try and get the allies as strong as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to the top right, go to our diplomacy box. We've got two diplomats here. We've got, I'm not sure why, but the diplomats are drawn between kind of like major powers and minor powers. I'm not quite sure I understand that, but you know, that's how it was done, so I guess it doesn't really matter. So you can see here when you go over each individual country, it'll give you a basically condition for them joining the war. For the entity, they have to be 60% alignment. Oh wait, no, that's the triple entity. So in order to be, I don't know, I don't really understand that. But anyway, so they've got to have certain conditions to join different sides. So I think one of the things we're going to want to do is we're going to want to cut Germany off from its overseas colonies. So we'll go ahead and throw one diplomat into Japan. You can see here the Germans are already sending diplomats into Belgium, Holland, Romania, and Bulgaria. So we'll send the other diplomat here into, we could send him into the Ottoman Empire to counter the Central Powers diplomat, but I'm not sure that really matters. Honestly, I don't think we're going to be able to stop the Ottomans from joining. One thing we do probably want to get to work on right away is the Italians, trying to get them into the war. They probably won't join for a while, but we certainly want to get them into the war as quick as possible. So we've got our two diplomats. Well, it looks actually, no, we've got a whole bunch of diplomats. We have 4 diplomats for the other minor powers, so that's cool. We'll go ahead and counter the Germans in Romania and Bulgaria then, because one of those guys has to join our side. We don't want to make things too difficult on Russia. And why don't we actually go ahead and send the other into Greece here, trying to strengthen the allies in the east as much as possible. There's also some research and development. It doesn't look like it's something we can do anything with yet, but there is a research element here on the upper right. Okay. So we've got our diplomats done. That's kind of the main decision thing. You can also plant munition, or not plant, but you can build munition factories. You can put in new generals, and you can also make concessions to quell, you know, if you have, looks like there's a diplomat or political aspect, there can be industrial unrest, so you can make concessions to them. You can change your government. You can basically unlock fortress guns, so to pull them out of the fortresses, print money, which is great, you know, if you want to have inflation, bomb forts, which we're not going to do because we're not really we're not attacking any forts here on the first turn, or declare war, which I think would be stupid because we've already got a big enough issue as it is. Oh, so we've already got no overlay displayed, so we're going to go ahead and close out of the decision mode. There's a strategic atlas. I'm just kind of giving a quick broad overview here of the different features. The strategic atlas basically shows you all of your forces, be they garrisons, corps, armies. You can sort them a whole bunch of different ways. You can sort them by name. You can sort them by faction. You can sort them by where their region name, their commander stats. So if you want to find, you know, the best commander, I guess. Goodness, this is a giant list. There are a lot of units, as you can see here. It's not the most easy to scroll. There's a pretty narrow box to scroll in here, but you can sort them by their commander stats. So you can see here, we scroll like that. There's our best, would be our best commander here. The first Sea Lord unit, which if we click on, does it bring us there? Yes, it does. So we can see here Jackie Fisher is the first Sea Lord of Britain. He's got 101 seniority, and he's the best commander, it looks like, that we've got, which is good because the Navy's important, I guess. You've got the ability to sort by power. So by far, the most powerful items on the map are going to the British Grand Fleet and the British Channel Fleet, which are going to be items that we'll get in right away. I'm not sure if the British are at war yet. I don't think they are as of early August here. And then you've got a whole bunch of different units down here. It looks like this is the French Mediterranean Fleet, the British Battlecruiser Fleet, Harwich Force. So the navies are all by far the most powerful units, although they will probably play the least important impact initially. Certainly the blockade will become important. And then you've also got the ability to sort by command penalties, cohesion, general supply, ammunition, self-sufficiency. The number of elements in a unit, its entrenchment level, which hopefully right now for most units is pretty low. Although actually no, it's the French I probably want it to be pretty high, right? Current orders and the status, so whether it's active or locked. Or actually no, locked is over here. So there's a lot of units that start off locked in this first turn, as we can see here. If we scroll down, we'll see they've got a little slash through them with a little lock button indicating that the unit is locked. The units that do not have that are down here in, I'm not sure what this region is, but it's bordering Alsace-Lorraine. And again, I'm going to butcher pronunciations here, so for that I do apologize. I've never taken a French course. I don't have the first clue on how to speak French, and I'm sure my pronunciations are going to be pretty bad. So my initial goal here is with this French army down here to advance on Mulhausen. I think that'll be the easiest to take and also advance into Alsace. I believe the French actually successfully, at least temporarily, took Mulhausen. They withdrew pretty quickly, but I think an advance into Mulhausen there and then an advance from the army in Nancy toward Colmar will allow us to kind of take the southern edge of this Alsace area. Our war plan has made Metz a strategic target, Morgenthau, Strasbourg, Saarborough, and Colmar, as well as Mulhausen. All these cities are the objective of our Operation 17. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to go ahead and try and advance there. Just as sort of a point of interest, the British Expeditionary Force is already in northern France, but it is a locked unit, so we can't do anything with it here in early August. A lot of our units are going to be locked. So we'll go ahead and jump in with the starting of planning our campaign. You can see here, when we click here, it looks like it's only got 366 firepower, but that's just the main stack here. So that's the Premier Army. We've got several other units which are stacked in here. We've got the 14th Corps, the 7th Corps, some aeronautics, so it looks like some French airplanes for recon, the 21st Corps, which is a reserve corps, the 8th and 13th Corps. So you can see there's quite a few different units. Each of them have their own firepower, which is not built into the Premier Army. So we'll go ahead and move these units toward Mulhausen. You can see when you highlight a unit, you get kind of a, I don't know what you call it, an overlay here that gives you some information about the different units. You can see the commander of this unit is Auguste Dubal. He's a 221 of a rating, and he's got those units there assigned to him. So we do that, then we click on the other unit. We can see these units are not moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to send the 14th and the 7th along with it, and we're going to go ahead and synchronize their movements. So there's some options down here on the lower left, which give you some movement, some combat, and some entrenchment orders. Right now we're just concerned about the combat orders. We're going to synchronize our movement with the other army stacks that are associated with it. We're going to do the same thing for the 7th, so they all move in tandem. That way one unit doesn't arrive and get defeated in detail because it arrived and is small and underpowered, compared to the other units. Now it's saying it's going to take about 7 days for the march to occur. I will say it doesn't seem like those times play out a whole lot. I'm assuming that's in ideal conditions with no one opposing us. So yeah. Anyway, and Party Commissar, I'm not sure if the British Expeditionary Force was really in Paris, or not Paris, in France by this point in time. It may just be something that's added as kind of they're unloading and they're in the process of moving. Or it may just be easier for game mechanics to start them out already in France and lock it so you can't use it, but they'll be there next turn. Does take out the element of being able to maybe try and intercept them if you're the Germans, though. I think that would be a neat feature, is if you could try and maybe intercept the expeditionary force as it crosses the channel. That was a pretty big fear of the British, and the Royal Navy spent the majority of the early days in the war helping guard those convoys. It might have been unrealistic for the Germans to try and intercept it, but it was a fear nonetheless that the Germans would attempt to hit those troops on transport ships mid-channel. As you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm changing the posture of our troops that are all going to be moving. I'm changing it from, what are they starting out with, a defensive stance and defensive posture. That influences kind of the actions that your armies will take. If there's enemy units in the same hex that you're in and you're in an assault posture, you're going to attack. And just kind of different levels. So we're doing an all-out attack as opposed to just a sustained attack, which my hope is to shock any German forces into just being forced to withdraw. It'll probably lead to higher casualties, though. Let's see here. So we've got this other army up here in Nancy that I told you about that I wanted to drive south toward Colmar. It could open us up to an attack through the main area in France here. I don't know what this region's called. I see Est, so maybe through Est, if that's the region name. It'll certainly open us up a bit. But we do have some other units here. We've got a reserve unit. We've got a reserve another reserve unit for the general headquarters, and we've got the Troms whatever army at Saint Mithal, or Saint Mihal. I really probably shouldn't even pronounce any of these places because, yeah, I don't know what I'm saying here. It looks like it's going to take 20 days though for them to get to Colmar, and they'll move south through Ipinal. But anyway, so we're going to do that. Maybe we'll force march them. We've got some pretty substantial forces down here or up here as well. Rather than drive north on Metz, I don't think we can take Metz straight out, and we do have another army right on the border there, so I'd rather try and take the southern part of Alsace first, and then see what happens from there. So we've already ordered the Duxmy army and the 20th Corps. We're going to go ahead and move the 26th and the 15th. I guess I could synchronize their movements. I probably should. I'm not going to change their posture, though, just because it is a long march. It'll probably be 2 turns before they arrive. So we'll go ahead and synchronize all of these units' movements. And I think that's about all we can really do here on the first turn. We're going to leave these troops. These are garrison troops in these forts, which are going to make it very difficult for the Germans to move through if they do try and attack through Nancy. We've got some recon units which are in a defensive posture. They will just kind of automatically conduct recon of the enemy, I believe. Let me double check here. Yeah, there's really not any options here for them, so I believe they conduct recon on their own. You don't really direct them. They just kind of go out and fly and do whatever. And everything else is kind of locked up right now. So one other thing we may want to look at doing before we end this turn is... One other thing we might want to do before we end this turn is kind of maybe do some recruitment. So we can go up here to the top left with this little icon, and we can start recruiting some troops. Now, we've got 4,675 victory points, so I don't really know where that... I guess it doesn't really matter. The war just started. We've got a state fund. We've got $445 essentially, or whatever that means in terms of income. Looks like we're increasing by about 716 a turn, according to this. Initial amount 475, changes from cities and income, changes from events and strategic decisions, and the final amount comes out to 845. So I guess 845, up from the previous turn. We've got a conscript or a manpower bonus. We've got war supplies, rail points, engagement points, which I'm not sure what that means. Maybe that just means the ability to fight battles. And then ammunition, which is simulating the ammunition being used by medium and heavy artillery. It doesn't include, I think, small field guns. It certainly doesn't include rifle ammunition. So we can go ahead and recruit some troops. We can click the all. We can filter. It looks by... Okay, so we've got the ability to filter by different types. So there's a colonial division. There's the British African troops as well. Indian British troops that you can recruit here. Just regular Great Britain troops and regular French troops. And where you can recruit them is determined by the type of unit that they are. So I think what I'm going to do, because I'm not sure how well this is going to play out, especially because I'm pretty new at these games, is I'm going to go ahead and recruit... I'd like to recruit just regular reserve divisions might be okay. I'll go ahead and recruit a regular French infantry division. It looks like we have 41 available. You can see there we've got 39 on map, so I assume that means we can recruit up to 2 more. It'll cost 66 money, 48 conscripts, 10 supply, and will take 60 days. So it may not arrive in time to be anywhere up forward, but if the enemy does break through, hopefully we can at least delay them till Paris. So we'll go ahead and drag it over Paris, and that's where it's going to recruit. So a new unit was successfully ordered. We can recruit a second one as well. We'll do that. You can see here our money and manpower is going down. It looks like we can actually recruit another one too. I didn't know we could do that many. But 2 is probably enough. We'll also recruit some reserve divisions in the general area. They only take 45 days to raise. Looks like we are limited to raising 1 per, well, maybe not 1 per hex, but there's some kind of manpower limit as far as how many you can recruit per hex. I'm not going to be recruiting for the British yet. just because the French are, I guess, more easily here, and it's a little bit early to know where the front lines are going to be. We're going to recruit one field artillery battery as well with what looks to be a French 75. And we're kind of pretty much ran through all of our money here this turn. Our conscripts are down, and I think that's about all we'll be able to do as far as training new troops. So I assume the mobilizations are also simulated by the fact that there are units that are locked. So it's already simulating reserve units on the field. And yeah, with that said, well, actually, no, we've got some other things we need to see here down. So we've got the Anglo-Japanese Treaty here. A nice little write-up here. It says the Anglo-Japanese Treaty is now available. Originally signed in 1902, the Anglo-Japanese alliance was originally designed to keep Russian ambitions in the Pacific in check. Reaffirmed and expanded after the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, it served as a catalyst for bringing Japan into the Great War against Germany. In return for their aid in rooting the Germans out of their Pacific holdings, the Japanese gained control over most of the previous German colonies in the Far East and strengthened their position against China on the mainland. So this event can only be played if the British Empire has joined the Entente, which they have, and Japan shifts 50% alignment toward the Western allies, I guess. So we've got that. We've got a neutral blockade option, which allows us to blockade neutral countries as well. The HMS Erin and HMS Ageod are now available. So basically these were some Dreadnought class battleships, not Dreadnought class, but they were Dreadnought quality. So they were, first-rate battleships that were being raised or built for the Ottoman Empire, but at the outbreak of war, the British government seized them for themselves. So they were being built in England, and the British seized them for themselves. And I don't want to forget, actually, to blockade the Germans. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. We'll take a look here at Scapa Flow in a moment. You can see here just telling us the war plans that are chosen. So we chose our historical war plan. The Austro-Hungarians chose the Kaiser plan. That's not a historical war plan, I don't think. Austrian GHQ will be fixed and established at Vienna under Conrad. Armies 1 through 4 will initially be attached to GHQ, and GHQ will be fixed. Objectives. So they're going to be launching an offensive against the Russians, it looks like. So more of a Russian-focused war plan than... Oh my goodness, I should have just gone with the historical option. So now the Germans are going to be fighting mainly on the defensive in the West. That's interesting. At least in this sense, you really do get Germany does choose some anti-historical options. So it looks like they're going to focus against Russia. Both the Austrians and the Germans are going to be focusing against Russia. So history's out the door, and Serbia has rejected their ultimatum. Well, let's see here. There's the battle cruiser fleet. There's got to be a box here for the British Grand Navy, isn't there? Grand Fleet, where are you? Maybe you're not available till next turn. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we've got our battle cruiser squadron here. I saw the Grand Fleet before when we were doing our Atlas map, so let's take a look at that. Command power. See the Grand Fleet here, so if we click on it, it should bring us to it. Okay. Apparently it's... Oh, there it is. Man, that's small. I almost missed it. So we can see here the Grand Fleet is up at Scapa Flow, the main British naval base. And there's a blockade box here, so we can move some units into the blockade box to get the blockade of the Germany underway. I'm not going to bother with, sending battleships into the blockade box. That's kind of I think, a silly thing to do. But what we will do is we'll send some submarines in, as well as maybe some lighter ships. We'll detach them off of the Grand Fleet. And you just do that by basically dragging and dropping. Each time you drag and drop, though, it creates a new unit. You can actually merge units by dragging one over top of the other. And there you go. We've got a fleet with 2 submarines that are moving that way. And we'll also create a light cruiser. We'll take one light cruiser squadron and have it operate on its own as well. That should be sufficient to blockade the enemy. And if the Germans decide to sally forth, then we can bring the Grand Fleet out to play. So here we are. So the Germans are choosing a defensive option. So that kind of throws Plan 17 into a wrench because, well, maybe it's good for us. I mean, it'll be easier for me because I don't have to worry about losing right away. The hard thing is I don't get to control the Russians. So in this case, the Russians are going to be out here fighting the Germans all by themselves and the Austrians all by themselves because, again, this game splits the Allies into 2 sides. But that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next turn. I will say that loading does take a little bit of time, so I'll just take a little bit to look through here the stream. Looks like I got 18 people watching, so thank you guys. Thanks a lot for showing up. Some historical discussion going on in the chat. Yeah, party. It does look like that Belgium may not be invaded, so I'm not sure what that means as far as I thought there was a way to prevent Britain from joining in on the war, but it seems, you know, the BEF's already in France, and we're already able to control British naval units, so I guess they're in the war, but I'm not really sure. I guess maybe Belgium won't be in the war. Certainly could make the West Front a little bit less interesting. I do think it's interesting that Moltke did historically kind of toy with the idea of not invading Belgium and focusing more on Russia, because he was concerned about bringing the British in against the Germans, and was concerned about kind of the political ramifications of invading Belgium, but he kind of went along with it anyway, because it was sort of like the French doctrine of Elan Vital, or however that's pronounced, where, you know, you attack at all costs regardless of tactics. General Michel, who was supposed to be the French commander a few years before, basically was in line to becoming the commander of the French armies, and then was more or less forced out and fell out of favor because of his support for a more defensive approach as opposed to the offensive approach. And that's how Joffre ended up getting command of the French army instead, is because of basically politics behind the whole thing. Thanks for that, Clown Sarton. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy making this stuff a lot. It's a lot of fun for me, you know, so I appreciate it. I always like to hear when people enjoy that. I don't know why Britain's joining in on the war, you know, if Belgium's not going to be invaded, which maybe they will, you know, maybe Germany won't follow the Moltke plan all that closely. But yeah, if Belgium's not getting invaded, that's a good question. Why is Britain getting involved? I don't know. But because, I guess. Yeah, he might have been a little bit like Longstreet. I don't know. I think Moltke just kind of sensed. Okay. The battle was just fought at Mulhausen, and we won pretty easily. It looks like they just had a garrison there of about 12,000 troops, which we wiped out. You can see we lost 800 men, so those are great casualty figures here. Total inflicted. I don't know what all of these things mean. There's a lot of information here, so you can kind of scroll over it to see our 8th Corps. Our unit had a medium hit probability, low hit probability, so I guess there's 3 different rounds in the battle. They were fatigued, nearby supply source improved their combat, deadly fire routed some elements, and through bad luck, unit missed the enemy several times in a row. So you can see here there's a whole bunch of different indicators. You can get a lot of information on how units performed in battle. You can see, for example, here the commanding officer led the unit well in this round, and in all, everything looks like it went pretty well. Yeah. Pretty much a decisive victory there. Granted, small force, you know, we had 181,000 men against their 12,000 man garrison, so there wasn't much of a chance. I didn't get to choose any tactics or strategy, which you can do in the bigger battles, but in this case, it was a battle that took place in Wooded Highland. The enemy had a defensive posture. We had an assault posture. And you can see here both sides used balanced deployments, which is just used automatically because of the fact that it was a small minor engagement and the enemy didn't have a general present. So it looks like our other forces in Ippenau is kind of closing in on Colmar, which is good. The enemy has an army in Freiburg, however, probably representing the fact that they're using a more defensive approach. I was never Bismarck over on 1890. I've been Tirpitz since this round started. I apologize if the noise is a little bit loud. I don't see an option in the settings here. 1 second. I don't see an option in the settings to change the volume of the battle sounds or whatnot. I could turn them off altogether if you think that would be better. The load turns are kind of long, at least on the first turn. You know, that might just because it's the very first turn and there's a lot going on. I guess we'll see if that's something that speeds up, because just like that, you know, it took me 5 minutes to load, not 5 minutes, but it took me a minute or two to load the first time I came into the game, and then, you know, that time I just resumed it right, you know, real quick out of hand. So I'm not sure if that's something that is going to be an issue, or if that's something which maybe speeds up as the battle or as the war goes on. So hopefully we'll see that speed up a little bit. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in here. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here and end this part here, and you can catch where I went from here during my stream in the next video. But for this video, that's going to be it. That's going to be the end of my part 1 Let's Play of To End All Wars. And again, this is based off of a live stream, so if it's not as polished as some of my other stuff, that's why. I appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer, signing out.